I will say it's unprecedented. We, in past presidential elections, have seen an absentee number that hovers around 10,000. As of the close of yesterday, we were at 35,000 absentee ballots that have been processed and or mailed out. And so we're at a very, very high number. We'll be probably close to 40,000 by the time we get to the cutoff on Thursday the 29th.
And you said 40,000 in comparison to 2016. Do you have those numbers?
Again, it would be probably somewhere around the 10,000 mark. I don't have those where I can put my hand on them, but we will have seen at least a 300% increase, I think, by the time we get to Thursday.
Wow. What can you make of that?
Well, I think that COVID has a lot to do with it. We've seen encouragement from the state level with the Secretary of State down to local election officials, just like myself, that have been encouraging folks to use the absentee process. And so folks are using it in unprecedented numbers out of concern of catching or spreading COVID-19.
Right. And so Thursday's the cutoff. What would you advise people who really have to make that last push to
Well, come to the courthouse. You can still request one by mail. There's still time to request one and receive one by mail, but just based on timing, I would encourage you to come vote in person. That'll be open through 4:30 on Thursday the 29th. Bring your patients if you plan to do that. As we warned folks very early in this process, the closer we get to the deadline, the longer the line, the longer the wait, and certainly yesterday and today are indicative of that. Our waits these last 2 days have been somewhere in the neighborhood of an hour and a half. And so, 2 weeks ago, you could have been in and out in about 15 minutes. And so we knew that would come, and so bring your patients. But we will certainly ensure, if you're here, that your absentee application and ballot are going to get processed and administered appropriately.
Wow. Yeah, I was here yesterday, and I saw the lines.
Yes, we've had long lines. Our circuit clerk, Deborah Kaiser, her staff, and few members of my staff are doing a tremendous job in managing it. We only have so much space, and so we're managing the line as quickly and as efficiently as we can. We have folks working through the line to ensure that folks that are in line have everything they need, that they have an application completed before they get into the courthouse, and so we're doing everything we can to process folks efficiently.
Yeah, I saw that there's tents set up that have absentee ballot drop-off.
Correct. If you've received your ballot in the mail and you want to drop it off as opposed to putting it in the mail, you've got a fully completed ballot you want to drop it by, you can actually drive through on the east side of the courthouse. We'll check your identification and accept your ballot. That way you don't even have to get out of your car. Now, we had originally said we would do that through 4 o'clock on the 29th. That actually will continue. We're going to do that again on the Friday the 30th and again on Monday the 2nd. So if folks have concerns about using the mail, that ballot drop-off will be available on Friday the 30th and again on Monday the 2nd from 9 a.m. to 4 p.m.
That's good to know. Is there anything else that people should know as it relates to absentee ballot requests that we may have missed?
Well, again, I would say if you haven't requested one by mail, please come and vote in person. If you have questions related to absentee, simply call 532-3684, and a member of the circuit clerk staff will be happy to assist you.
Awesome. Okay, thank you. And then we'll move on to actual election day.
Sure.
Actually, sorry.
That's okay.
One more thing, going back. There's chatter about perhaps Alabama becoming an early voting state. Do you all think that if that ever happens, that you would open up other precincts than just the courthouse? Because I know I spoke to some folks and they said, well, it'd be good if we had other places to vote early.
I won't speak to it until we see legislation passes that would put it in place. It certainly is a legislative issue, and so right now we have the absentee process. It's not necessarily early voting, as early voting exists in other states, and so we will work with what we have within the parameters of the law as it exists currently. If we see a legislative change related to early voting or the absentee process, this office, our circuit clerk, would certainly be in a position to administer whatever the law requires us.
Awesome. Okay. Finally, moving on to Election Day, where people show up to the polls.
Sure.
So, of course, we're in the middle of a pandemic. Well, what are some tips that you would offer folks?
Well, we are going to have waits at polling locations. We're going to have a high turnout for this election. And so number one, as I mentioned, bring your patients. Social distancing is required, and just by virtue of having to maintain that 6 feet, lines will be longer. It will take a little bit longer to process folks. The same technology is in place. We'll be able to process individuals efficiently, but the wait could be a little longer because of that 6 foot distance that's required. We're strongly encouraging voters, please wear your mask to the polling location. We can't deny you your right to vote if you choose not to wear a mask, but we'd certainly encourage you to do it. Be mindful of those around you. Be mindful of our election workers. We could not administer an election without them, and the majority of them fall into the highest at-risk category. So please wear a mask if at all possible. If you need a mask, we're glad to provide you one, of course, at the door. Again, make sure that you maintain that 6 feet of distance. Use hand sanitizer as you come in. We'll have an election worker that's providing that to you as you enter the polling location. And as simple as it might sound, use your own pen. Pull the pen out of your pocket, out of your handbag, bring your own pen. It's one less thing for us to sanitize. It's also one less thing that could cause some cross-contamination with this virus. Of course, there will be pens available to voters if they don't bring one, but you can certainly use your own. Keep in mind that any marking device, as long as it's not transparent, can be used on a ballot. So as long as it's not a highlighter, any pen color, again, as long as it's not transparent, you can use, so folks can feel comfortable using their own marking device.
Thank you for clearing that up, because there's been this thought that if you use a red pen,
As long as it's not transparent, the machine is going to pick it up. And keep in mind, your ballot is tabulated on site once it's fed into that voting machine. And so if there's a problem, the machine is going to make a determination and will kick that ballot back and allow you to vote another ballot. That ballot would be spoiled. The election worker could give you another ballot if you were to make an error or an ink color weren't to be accepted. But again, as long as it is not transparent, it will work.
Good point. I'm glad you mentioned that, because too, when it comes to the absentee ballot, there are ways that it might not be accepted, and so you have any tips on that?
Well, in the absentee count, if there's a concern about someone's ballot, if it can't be fed through the machine, it would be looked at and counted by hand, if necessary. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
But we do count those ballots using technology.
Okay, and how can someone ensure who submitted an absentee ballot that their ballot was counted?
Well, the only thing that they can do is ensure that it was in fact received back. If folks have questions about their absentee ballot, they can look and confirm that it's been received back by the circuit clerk by going online, or they could call the circuit clerk's office for that information.
Good point. Okay, I think I'm pretty much done,
Okay.
unless you have
Again, I would
else.
just encourage folks to bring your patients on the 3rd. It's going to be a long day. There will be waits, and so a recommendation, if you don't work a traditional schedule or maybe you're retired, think about voting at a non-peak time. It's going to be busiest first thing in the morning, during lunch, and at the end of the day, so consider maybe voting late in the morning or in the early afternoon, because those peak times will be much heavier as far as foot traffic at polling locations.
Awesome.
Okay.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
You're most welcome.
In case you're wondering,